Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm currently reporting from an undisclosed location because I'm playing a private game. Now, for those of you who haven't been following this channel long, I almost never play private games unless it's with people that I trust and I think it's in a spot that's safe. This game checks both of those boxes, so we're going to be playing 50, 100. And it's a fun lineup, so we'll see how things go. Lately, it's been a little rocky, but maybe today things turn around, or maybe it just keeps getting worse. We'll have to see. Before we get into the cards, I wanted to give you all a quick reminder that if you're watching this, the day it comes out is my giveaway game on Coin Poker. You can see the details right here, but I'll be giving away $1,000 every 10 minutes, and I'm gonna be online for 5 hours. All you have to do to be eligible is play at one of the meetup game tables. Again, details are here. I'm starting at 5 p.m. Pacific, going to 10 p.m. I hope to see at least a few of you guys there. Last time, there weren't too many players at my online meetup game, so I think your chances to win are pretty decent. So once you've done that and signed up, also make sure to get some tickets for my band's show coming up on March 12th. Ticketmaster link is down below if you guys are into that. It's going to be a fun show and a lot of great bands on the bill, including Good Terms and some other cool local talent. So hope to see you guys there, like I said. And I think that's everything for today's announcements. With that out of the way, let's get to poker. All right, guys, here we go, playing 50, 100 with the $200 straddle on almost every single hand. In this first one, there's a button raised to 400, and I'm next to act with King 10 offsuit. Against the button raise, I think this hand is okay to re-raise with. Not every single time, but this time I do go for it. I kick it up to $2,000. Now the big blind cold calls the 2,000. But the button gets out of the way, so not exactly what I expected, but it seems okay as we go to a board of King 6-4 with 2 clubs. Almost always going to have the best hand, and we have the King of Clubs as a backup plan. I continue for a small size of 1,400. My opponent makes the call, and we go to the Queen of Spades on the turn. Really nice card. One of the few hands I was a little worried about, which is King Queen, becomes less likely, and that's assuming we were even behind to begin with. Of course, I'm going to keep betting. Top pair should still be strong enough for some value, so I make it $5,000 this time. My opponent thinks for a little now and calls again. Not sure what he's got, perhaps a straight draw like 7-5 suited, or maybe a flush draw. River card's not my favorite for that reason. It's the Queen of Clubs, so the flush does get there, but the straights miss. I decide to check now and see what he wants to do, and instead of checking back, he throws in $7,400. Tough spot now for me, but I think with the King of Clubs, we should err on the side of calling, especially because it's a small size, less than half pot that my opponent bet, so we don't have to be right super often. I toss in the money. He doesn't have a flush, but he does have Queen Jack of Hearts. So he turned a pair and rivered trips. That is good enough to beat my top pair. Nice hand, sir. At this point, I add $50,000 to my starting stack, and we move to the second hand where there are a bunch of limps, and I look down at Ace King suited on the button, much better than King 10 off. I raise it to 1,000 and everybody calls. So we go multi-way to a board of King 7-5 with 1 diamond, top pair, top kicker. Feeling pretty good about my hand, except the big blind decides to lead out now for $4,000. Not sure what's up with that, but the player on his left calls, gets to me on the button, and we have a decision to make. Do we want to just call or do we want to raise? Well, I think both options make sense. But the reason I like raising a little more is because the big blind doesn't have a whole lot behind. So I expect if I raise, he's going to go all in or fold, and then that gets the player behind him out. So we could get heads up versus the big blind. Not sure I want to take 1 pair 3 ways, so I make it 10,500. I don't think sizing matters too much here because, again, the big blind is either going to fold or jam, or at least that's what I expect since he's only got like 25k left. But instead, he ends up just calling. So, yeah, not what I expected. Player behind him now also calls for 10.5k. So we have a really strange hand developing now. Turn card is the 7 of clubs, which I'm happy to see. Makes pocket sevens less likely. Maybe pocket fives a little concerning, but I don't know if either player would play that hand this way. So anyway, it pairs the board, and now the big blind, after leading the flop and getting raised, decides to lead again. All in for 20,000 and change. The other player thinks for a little and calls the 20,000, and now I'm really not loving my hand because the guy behind is probably trapping with at least a king. However, I do beat every other king in the deck, but what if he's got something like king 7? What if he's got something like, I don't know, pocket 5s, like I said? He could just have a single 7, but I don't really know how that would be possible. Yeah, it's a tough spot. On one hand, my hand is really strong. On the other, can we really expect to beat 2 players here? It's 20,000 for me to call. Don't have to be right super often, same as last hand, so eventually I do toss in the money. Unfortunately, right when I call, the video stopped recording. I think I accidentally touched the record button or shook the table in a way that my phone just freaked out. So we're going to freeze frame here, but I want to tell you guys what happened at Showdown. We went to the 10 of diamonds on the end. We beat the small blind. He's got king queen, but the player behind him has queen 7 of hearts, meaning he called a flop raise with just middle pair and binked it right on the turn. Good enough to triple up. There was a small side pot between me and the small blind, so we get some rebate, but not enough to make this hand worthwhile. So we lose the first 2 ones as we go to the third hand where there's a raise to 300. I make it 1,200 on his left with king 3 suited. Not strong enough to call, so probably should fold most of the time, occasionally get frisky with it. As you can tell, we're getting frisky. Player on my left cold calls the 1,200, and then the middle position raiser also calls. We go 3 ways to a board of queen, jack, 10 with 2 hearts, 1 diamond. Not much going on for me aside from the open ender, but I am the only player who theoretically can have ace king in this spot, and of course that would be the nuts, so that's all the excuse I need to start bluffing. First player checks, I bet 2,400. Guy on my left calls, but the other guy's out of there, so we go heads up to a turn, which is the 5 of diamonds, bringing in another flush draw. And from what I understand, having strong hands on draw heavy boards equals bet big. So of course I'll do the same with this bluff here. I throw in 10,000 now, which is over the size of the pot. My opponent now thinks for a while and folds. We don't end up having to get there. We collect this pot with just king high. We don't win a lot of money in the process, but at least it's a moral victory, if nothing else. As we move to the next one where there's an early position limp, I make it $500 on the button with the first real made hand of the day. We've got pocket kings. Very nice timing, especially since I've been playing a lot of hands pre-flop that you guys haven't really seen. So I don't expect to get too much respect. And sure enough, the limper from early position now limp raises to 2,000 bucks. Always a little scary when you're getting limp re-raised, but of course with pocket kings we can't just call. I have to raise again, so I make it $8,000 and we get the very dreaded re-raise to 25,000 bucks. Are we really running into aces with pocket kings? I'm not sure. It seems quite likely, if I'm being honest, but pocket kings in position, just way too strong to fold pre-flop, I think, unless you have a very, very good read on your opponent. And I've played with this guy quite a bit. He's not the type that you want to fold kings pre-flop to. So I decide to just flat call and play in position. Let's see what happens. We go to a board with over 50,000 already in the middle. Guys, it is the absolute dream in a 5-bet pot, or is it a 6-bet pot? I don't even know. I lost track, but you get the point. It's king, jack, deuce with 2 spades. We flopped the nuts in position. I've got around $75,000 remaining as well, which is nice because it shouldn't be too difficult to get the money in given how big the pot is already. My opponent checks this flop, and if we were super deep, I would probably just start betting, but like I said, there's not a ton of money left behind, so I decide to check back and perhaps feed him some rope if he was getting out of line pre-flop. Turn card is the 3 of diamonds, changes nothing, and now he does put in a bet of 25,000. I contemplate a raise for a little bit here. I know that's unorthodox, but I figured it might even look weaker than a call. but I think that's fancy play syndrome to a large degree, so I decided to just call and see what he does on the river. There's over 100 G's now in the pot as we go to the 8 of hearts on the end. Unfortunately, he now checks it, so it looks like I'll have to do my own bidding. I've got a little under 50,000 left in my stack, and of course that's all going in there. Fingers crossed that we get called, as we do have the nuts. Just a question of whether or not we're getting this additional 46,600, I believe was the exact count. My opponent doesn't snap call, but he also doesn't snap fold, so now we sit here and wait. A minute goes by, 2 minutes go by, and eventually he calls. That, of course, is good news. I turn it over and we collect a nearly $200,000 pot headed our way. Not too bad. In the next one, it folds all the way to me in the big blind. The straddle is on. I've got 10-8 offsuit. I limp in, and now he makes it $1,200. I think the standard play here is to just fold, but I get a little stubborn and call, convincing myself that I have some type of post-flop advantage versus this guy. Whether or not that's true remains to be seen, but we go to a board of ace-9-7 with 2 hearts. Interesting flop because, of course, I've got the open-ended straight draw, but can also represent some hearts if they come on the turn or river. So when I check and he bets 1K, I spring into action with a check raise to 4,000. I could have 2 pair, I could have pocket sevens, I could have combo draws, lots of hands that might want to raise here. Looking back, I think a call might actually be a little better because it is an ace-high board. But anyways, make it 4,000. My opponent calls, and we go to the deuce of spades on the turn. No help for me. Now what do we want to do? Well, I think if I had something super strong like 2 pair or better, I would want to bet big here. So I decide to do the same thing with this 10-high draw. I throw in $16,000 into 10K, which is around 150% of the pot size. My opponent does not seem too comfortable, but eventually does decide to make the call. At this point, I kind of decide to give up unless we get there on the river. But it's the 9 of spades, and we definitely don't get there. Still sitting here with 10 high, and it's not even a heart. You know, if it was a heart, I might have gone for it because we could represent flush draws that get there. But the 9 of spades is just a complete brick, so I think it over for a bit and decide to wave the white flag. I check it, expecting my opponent to check back with an ace, and then we just lose, right? But instead, he now puts in a bet of $20,400. And now I'm really curious, what exactly is this about? My check raise on the flop and my big bet on the turn represent sets. All of those have now become either quads or full houses. Could have a hand like 9-7. There's just all sorts of strong hands that I would play this way, or I would just have something that missed, right? So if those are the hands that I'm representing, why would my opponent bet an ace for value at this point? Instead, this bet to me looks like a missed draw of his own. Maybe he's got king, queen of hearts, king, jack of hearts. He might have jack 10 of hearts. I don't have any removal to that. He could have something like 6-5 of hearts. I also don't have removal to that. There's just all these combo draws that he could have that now miss, and he decides he needs to bluff. So with this bet really not representing an ace, at least not in my opinion, we have an opportunity to go for the rebluff. If he's got a missed draw, we can steal this pot with 10 high. And I only have $24,000 more than his original 20K bet, so I would be all in for 44K. So after putting all these pieces together, I know it's a bit long-winded, but I'm explaining my thought process. I do decide to jam all in. This is obviously a bit scary because we're going to get snap called by strong hands, but we're also going to get snap folds from all those aforementioned bluffs. However, my opponent now goes into the tank, which makes no sense to me. And at this point, I start to realize that this guy did actually bet an ace on the river for value, which to me makes 0 sense, but maybe I'm overthinking it and the guy is just like, I have top pair, so I'm going to bet. And that's kind of the issue about playing with players that don't necessarily play a whole lot of poker, is sometimes they just bet hands that you don't expect them to bet, and then they call all-ins with them, which is what happens here. He turns over ace queen after making the tank call, which is a brutal hand to see because I did not assign him that at all on the river. I mean, what worse hand is he expecting to get called by? I have no idea, but instead he gets me to kind of outplay myself in a way, and we lose this $150,000 pot. I actually somewhat like my play. It seems a little too risky, but I definitely like it. It's just weird to run into this particular hand, and you know, it was definitely unnecessary. So Could have been avoided, but yeah, this one was kind of brutal. Moving on to the next one. This hand is a lot easier to play than 10-8 offsuit. I've got pocket queens. There's a raise to 500. I make it 2K. Small blind now makes it $7,000. We're getting a lot of action here. Back to me, and we could call here like the king's hand and just play in position, but this player I suspected was a little bit on tilt, so I decided to raise it up to 17,000 and get some value in position. My opponent, however, has no time for any of this raise, re-raise, small kind of thing. He just decides, you know what, you either got it or you don't. He jams all in for 65K. Not necessarily a fun spot with pocket queens. We might be running into aces or kings, and of course we're just flipping against ace-king. But he could have pocket jacks, or he might have even pocket tens and decides he's done with it. I make the call, and my opponent announces ace-king. He doesn't show it, but I do believe him. We run it just once. And it comes queen high. A little bit of run get on our side. My opponent does not improve on the turn or river. And we collect this $130,000 pot. So we get almost all of the money back from the previous hand with 10-8. And we move to this next one where once again, we've got red pocket kings on the button. Deja vu, and a very welcome deja vu at that. There's a late position raised to 300. I make it 1,200 on the button. And I cannot believe how much action we're getting with these premium holdings. The small blind now makes it $3,600. Back around to me, and just like the last hand, I am not going to be flatting kings in this situation. I make it $12,200 to go. But now the small blind gives me some bad news and raises again. 26,000. This is the same player from the 10-8 versus ace-queen hand. Don't think he's messing around, and I think it's painfully obvious that we're probably up against either aces or the last remaining combination of pocket kings. Maybe pocket queens or ace-king suited. I don't know. It seems unlikely, but I just can't bring myself to fold kings pre-flop, especially when we're sitting pretty deep. So I decide to make the call, and we see a flop of queen, queen, 6. My opponent now bets very small, 13,300. I contemplate raising since his bet is so small, but I decide to just call, which I think is the more standard play. And we go to the jack of diamonds on the turn. Not necessarily a fun spot now, because if he somehow does have pocket jacks, which I don't think he does, but if he does, we now lose to that hand. We obviously lose to pocket queens as well. We lose to aces. Not a lot of stuff we're beating now aside from exactly ace king, but my opponent does check it now, and maybe that is what he has. I check it back, and we go to the 3 of hearts on the river. He checks again, and I'm feeling pretty decent about my kings now. My opponent has checked the turn and the river. But I start to think, what are we really going to get value from that we're actually beating? I don't know. I mean, maybe we could put in some tiny bet and hope to get called by ace king, but it seems like wishful thinking. And what I really don't want is to value own myself versus aces or face a check raise from quads or some type of full house. So yeah, it seems a little weird, but I decide to just check back and announce pocket kings, at which point my opponent promptly turns over those dreaded aces. So we do run kings into aces here and lose a pretty decent sized pot. In the next one, there's a raise to 600. Another guy calls, and I look down at jack deuce of hearts. Now, I don't really want to name too many names because, like I said, this was a private game, and I feel like we should keep it low key, but just know that some of these players are regulars that I've played with a lot. And I feel like it's okay to give certain guys action when the time is right. So for that reason, I bump it up to 3,000 with jack deuce on the button. Suited. All right, it is suited. Okay, it's a little more defendable. But anyway, both guys call, and we go to a board of 8-4 deuce with not a heart in sight. We do have bottom pair, however. And of course, we could start bluffing now. Would be a lot better if there was at least one heart out there to go along with our bottom pair. But I decide to continue putting the pedal to the metal with a $6,000 bet when they check it over to me. The first player makes the call, but the other guy folds. And we finally make a hilarious hand this vlog. It's the deuce of spades on the turn, giving me the most disguised trips you've ever heard of. My opponent checks again. He's got 26,000 behind. And I think this is a very easy all-in, because if I had some sort of flush draw or straight draw or whatever, of course I would want to apply maximum pressure, and we are unblocking a ton of hands that might call. So I shove all in for 26,000. It ain't rocket science. I've got trips, and I think we're going to get called a lot. Sure enough, he snap calls. So I'm like, wait, are we in trouble? Does he have a boat? But it turns out he's just got ace-5 of clubs for the combo draw. He asked to run it twice, I happily oblige, and he makes a flush on the first river, but it's the jack of clubs. Sorry, bro. Flush no good. Second river is the 5 of diamonds, giving him a pair. That's also no good because trips beats that. And just like that, we collect a $73,000 pot with jack deuce suited. And if you haven't learned anything yet from this video, it's probably that kings are no good, jack deuce suited, very good. Moving on to the next one, there's a raise to 600, 2 callers, and I defend the straddle with 6-4 of diamonds. Flop comes down 9-6 deuce with 1 diamond, checks to middle position. He's not the initial raiser, by the way. He decides to stab for 1200. Back around to me, and I think this is a nice hand to check raise with. My opponent's going to be betting a 9 pretty often. He might even have a 6 himself, something like 7-6 suited or whatever. And I think our hand functions nicely since we could have 2 pair, we could have sets, and we've got the backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw possibilities going on. So I play this one aggressively. I make it $6,400 to go. Calling also seems okay, probably better to call heads up though, but multi-way I like a raise or a fold better. So I make it 6,400. He does make the call after a bit of thought, and we go to the 7 of spades on the turn. Interesting card because it's questionable whether this one's better for him or me. I still think we could have a lot of strong hands like sets and 2 pairs, and all I'm thinking to myself is those hands would still bet for value, and if he's got a 9, he's really going to hate this spot. So I throw in $11,000. My opponent now thinks for a while, and this is the same guy that we just stacked with jack deuce of hearts. I think he's getting a little sick of my, well, I shouldn't say this word on YouTube, but I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. And eventually, it does seem like that's exactly what's happening because he says, F it, if you have it, you have it, I'm all in. Of course, I quickly fold my pair of 6s, and he shows ace-6 of hearts. So he actually had the best hand. I mean, I guess if I had something strong, we would have felted him again, but instead, he shuts it all down and forces me out of the pot, which is, it was just a funny hand. This one here kind of goes to show that these games can be a lot of action, and sometimes you get destroyed when you try to bluff, or other times you can win big pots if you've got it. In the next one, there's 1 limper, middle position makes it 600, and now you're probably wondering why there are 2 pieces of chocolate in front of me. Well, we decided to start playing the bounty game, and these were the only indicators available in the room that I thought made sense. So chocolates equals how many hands you've won in a row. The way this game works is if you win 3 in a row, you get 1,000 from each player. If you win 4 in a row, you get 2,000 from each player, and so on. So if I can win this hand, we collect 1,000 from every player. I have queen jack offsuit. I of course am in there, and 3 other callers jump in as well. So multi-way to a board of 10-7-3 rainbow. Gets to one of the limpers who decides to lead out on this board for 3,000 bucks. Gets to me in position, and of course I've got nothing but 2 overcards and the potential of stealing this pot one way or another. I think makes it enough of an incentive to stick around. We could of course improve to top pair, or potentially could make some backdoor straights that, you know, would be quite valuable since I'm pretty deep against this player. So I decide to float and see what happens. Turn card is the 6 of diamonds. Everyone else is out of there, so we're heads up. And now the limper checks. This is kind of what I predicted to happen because I don't think he would play 2 pair or better this way on the flop. Instead, it just seems like very clearly he's got a 10 and isn't sure what to do. And I want to apply maximum pressure to those kinds of holdings. So I throw in a bet of 20,000 bucks. That's right, the old double pot-sized bet on the turn. My opponent does not seem comfortable at all at this point, but at the same time, he knows some of my work, and I do have those 2 markers in front of me indicating that I'm trying pretty hard to win this pot. So there's no hiding from that, and I think he knows that because eventually he does call for 20,000. Not what I wanted to see. I was really hoping he would just fold a 10, but it looks like it's not going to be so easy. However, the river is the jack of hearts, improving us to top pair, and what I presume is the winning hand at this point, because again, if he had 2 pair or something very strong, he probably would have check raised the turn, but him just calling, I think, makes it painfully apparent he's got a 10. So now a jack rates to be the best hand more often than not, and my opponent has checked it again. Of course, he could be trapping with 9-8, having made the nuts on the turn and feeding me some rope, but unless he's got exactly that, I think we're going to have the best hand and we could get some more value. He's got around 50k remaining, and I think to myself, maybe, just maybe, we could go all in with this top pair. It's going to look either like the nuts or a bluff to him, and perhaps he hero calls with a 10. We can collect a massive pot with just top pair, and of course get that bounty as well. So checking back I think is fine, certainly reasonable, since you could argue we might only get called by better. But like I said, with this bounty game dynamic going on and the fact that my image isn't exactly great at this point, I think we might get called by worse, and for that reason I do eventually go all in. We don't get snap called, so that's good news, but he does go into the tank for about 5 minutes. This hand took forever. I was really rooting for a call because, again, I just think he's got something like 10-9, maybe he's got king 10, maybe queen 10, I don't know, hands like that is what I'm expecting him to be holding. But eventually he folds 7-3, face up. That's right, this guy actually had the best hand and I accidentally bluffed him off it. And I think that clearly indicates my river all-in was just way too thin. I thought that maybe he was the type of player to make a hero call with a 10, but if he's folding 2 pair in this situation, then yeah, my all-in on the river is not the best play, but somehow it works out perfectly because he ends up folding a better hand. So yeah, the old accidental bluff, not something you see a lot on this channel. I don't think I've accidentally bluffed someone in years, actually, so there it is. Certainly not complaining though, because that means we win this hand and of course collect the bounty from every player. In the next one, I open King Jack from first position. We get 3 callers and go to a little flop of ace queen 10. No big deal. We just flopped Broadway. Straddler checks, I continue for 1200. Player on my left calls, we've got the nuts, so I'm happy to see not everyone's folded. But it's just heads up as we go to a turn, which is the queen of spades. Now, as much as I like my hand, I try to keep my wits about me, and I recognize that this card is probably a little better for him than it is for me, at least in theory, so for that reason I decide to check. It allows him the possibility of value betting worse, and of course he might use this card to bluff if he's got something like a flush draw, let's say. So anyway, he does bet now, $3,300. I make the call, and we go to the 5 of clubs on the river. I check it again, praying that my opponent doesn't check back an ace. But he doesn't. He puts in a bet of $9,300. Now, I know the board is paired. We might no longer have the winning hand, and my opponent has bet fairly big. 9,300 into 11K. That's a big bet. But of course, just calling would be a little too weak, especially after I underrepresented my hand strength on the turn. So I decide to put in a check raise, and as much as it's going to suck, I'll probably fold if we get raised again. But I don't want to risk calling and seeing him turn over just trips, and of course we could get a lot of value from 3 queens. So I make it $35,000 to go. He's got like 100k behind. I don't want to hear those 2 magic words, all in. But eventually he says, I call. So that looks like good news, and sure enough, King Jack is the winning hand. We win this $90,000 pot. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the last hand of the night, which, in my opinion, is one of the most interesting hands I've played in a while. Here we go. There's an early position raised to 500, middle position bumps it up to 2,000, and I look down at a premium on the button, Ace King suited. Of course, I'm going to re-raise myself, so I make it $6,000. First raiser folds, but the re-raiser, who made it 2k, decides to stick around for 6,000. So just like that, we have a 4-bet pot in our hands with nearly 13k in the middle as we go to a board of 8, 7, 4, 2 clubs. Not too shabby in a 4-bet pot, flopping 2 overs and the nut flush draw. He checks. I decide to continue betting for around half pot, $7,000. Now my opponent puts in a check raise, which I did not really expect to see. I'm immediately assigning him hands like either pocket 8s or of course many combo draws available like Jack 10 of clubs. He might have 10-9 of clubs, Queen Jack of clubs, which is just a flush draw, but I do think he might play those hands this way. And once in a blue moon, he could even have hands like pocket aces or pocket kings that slow play pre-flop and decide to get a little sneaky. So anyway, he makes it 28,000. I, of course, am going nowhere. A raise doesn't make much sense either, which leaves just one option. I make the call, and we go to a turn card on which we get there right away. It's the 4 of clubs, giving me the nut flush. Yeah, the board is paired, which is slightly concerning because, again, he could have pocket 8s, but it's a 4-bet pot, and he would have had to re-raise pocket 8s and then call another $6,000 raise pre-flop out of position with that hand. So I don't think he's going to have pocket 8s a ton of the time. Certainly not impossible, but I don't think it's also going to be too prevalent. Anyway, my opponent continues now for $22,000, and what I'm really stoked about is that I think he's just got a flush. I think he's got queen 10 of clubs, 10-9 of clubs. Like I said, a lot of hands out there that get there on the turn, but now I'm actually beating. So he's got around $150,000 left after this bet, I think. And the question is, do we want to just call or do we want to raise and try to get the max? I think it's kind of close. I don't want to shut down his bluffs, but at the same time, I don't think he has too many. And it would be quite a shame to leave money on the table if we are up against a weaker flush. So I decide to raise right away. I also think we're going to get called by aces and kings, which, like I said, they might be in there sometimes, not very often, but once in a while. So I do bump it up. I make it $52,000, trying to set up a proportional all-in on the river. My opponent thinks for a while and eventually calls, which makes it seem like he was certainly not bluffing if he's calling 52K going into the river, which comes to 7 of diamonds, double pairing the board. And I know at first that might look a little scary, but it's actually a pretty decent card because one of the few hands that also was possible is pocket 7s, and now that becomes way less likely. So pocket 4s, very unlikely. Pocket 7s, very unlikely. There are 3 possibilities of him having pocket 8s, so, you know, a little concerning. And of course, there's 6-5 of clubs. Let's not forget that. Questionable whether or not he would call 6,000 pre-flop out of position with 6-5 of clubs, but that is a straight flush, right? Let's not ignore that completely. But of course, when he checks it over to me, there are still all those other flushes that could call an all-in. There are sometimes those pocket aces and pocket kings. And of course, he might just have something like pocket jacks or pocket 10s that he's overplaying a little bit, and we beat those hands as well. So think it over for a while and decide, you know what, if he's got pocket 8s and we get crushed, so be it. I don't want to leave money on the table. I jam all in, and he snap calls. I announce a flush, and it turns out he doesn't have a boat or quads. He does have a flush, but it's 6-5 of clubs. That, my friends, is a straight flush versus the ace high flush, which means we get our world absolutely rocked and lose a $360,000 pot, one of the biggest pots I've played in my life, and all the chips are going to the other guy. Quite a brutal cooler, and it puts a screeching halt to our session. I did have around, I don't know, 70,000 left at this point, but something about this hand just kind of took the wind out of my sails, and I decided to call it a night. Quite a disappointing end to the session, but hey, you can't say there was not action on this night. So, as always, I hope you guys enjoyed the hands, and stay tuned for some final thoughts.
Well, I think it's fair to say that this game is very, very, very cruel sometimes. But at the same time, I've been on the other side of these runs many times. So, you know, that's just how math works. Sometimes you go on sick heaters and sometimes you are just cursed for a while. Unfortunately, I am in the cursed department lately. I think I'm down something like 700K in the past 30 days. Which is pretty brutal because I started the year up 800K. We barely just hit March and I've already had 700K up, 700K down. I mean, this game's ridiculous. Sometimes I just want to quit and play video games all day on the couch, take walks in the morning and, you know, touch some grass. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this vlog. It was a hell of a vlog, a lot of cool hands, a lot of interesting pots, and I don't think this one's going to disappoint any of the fans out there, whether you're rooting for me or against me. I think, you know, these hands were crazy, right? Like this was some TV kind of stuff. Moving on, there is the imminent giveaway game happening on March 3rd. Please don't forget about that. I'm going to be doing the $1,000 every 10 minutes. So that should still be a good time. Stakes are going to be 50 cents, $1, nothing too crazy, but the promotion should be fun. And I think I'm going to try to stream it on my YouTube channel as well. So make sure to join down below and be a part of that. And of course, I would much appreciate if you guys came out to the show on March 12th for Dear Delta, my band. It's going to be in Los Angeles, and I know a lot of you guys are from that area, so make sure to come out, support, and enjoy the show. But that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for all the support. Hopefully there are better days ahead, but tonight feels pretty bad. Anyway, that's it for tonight, guys. I'll see you all next time. Peace.